Wouldn't it be nice if the MCT team could have been involved, like in my dating life way back when? You could have Ian organize all the agenda for the evening's date. Then you could have Chris announce each one of the gal, and then put the CD or 8-track in my case in the stereo. There would be Phil's voice, like KMCT, bring me the sweet sounds or whatever. And then you get home, and for those of you who don't know it, Curtis spent all night baking those raspberry pies, so you could have a raspberry pie when the evening wrapped up. Anyway, thank you for spending your lunch with us and the group of esteemed panelists. It is it's an amazing time. Somebody told me today that I guess there's been some margin compression in the business, which I was surprised by, but that aside. But we're here to talk about that, and here to talk about the general industry and what's going on in terms of profitability in terms of 2019. And I thought I would let each of the panelists, starting with Leo, introduce themselves, spend 15 or 20 seconds telling everybody here about yourself, and then we'll plunge into a couple questions that I have.
Absolutely.
So, Leo?
Yep. Hello, everybody. My name is Leo Dunn. I'm chairman of Bay Capital Mortgage. We're in Annapolis, Maryland. We're a retail shop, no servicing. Do a little under $400 million. In February, we'll be 25 years in business. Been an MCT client now, maybe for 5 to 6 years. How about you, Sonny?
Thank you. Sonny Bringle, president of Victorian Finance. We're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We do about a little under $500 million a year, and 90% purchase, all retail. A couple of call centers that are just small levels and testing. We've been an MCT client since 2010, and this is one of my favorite events, and so I don't miss this one.
Hi, my name is Todd Pearson. I'm with a company called The Mortgage Firm. President, founder, started it back in 1995, primarily in Florida. About 90% of our book is in Florida, licensed in a few other states, all retail. We service about 20% of our conventional business, and that's me, Todd Pearson.
Phil Rosori. These guys are going to speak a lot clearer than I did, I think, my last topic. So I'm just here to provide some commentary. Yeah.
I think I'm going to lower my voice.
Yeah.
Yes. So margin compression. Everybody here is feeling it. Even vendors, to some extent, are feeling margin compression. We'll actually start with Phil. Because you see a very broad range of clients and see the pricing that comes through MCT and so forth. Have you seen any particular cause or causes on an industry-wide level for it?
Yeah, well, I think most everybody in the room understands kind of the issues that occurred with Ginnie premium securities because of what was going on in the Earl world of the refis. There were some bad actors, substantially over churning these these loans, which of course caused issues from a perspective of the end buyer. And a lot of people ask me, once Ginnie put that rule in of 6 months and took some of the bad players out, we won't name names, but forced them out of multi-issuer pools and put them into single issuer pools so they could, obviously directly target the pricing and get those actors out of those pools. A lot of people thought that things would immediately get better. And in the world of the end buyer, the PIMCOs and those types, they need to see some experience occur. And talking last night to our director of analytics, Bill Berliner, he was saying some of the CPR and kind of numbers that have recently come out haven't been as good as people would have expected with the new rules. So that's kind of the big kind of structural thing that happened on the security side. It was really with regards to Ginnie premium pricing, which of course they can talk to you about how that affects profitability.
That's a pretty good capital markets answer right there.
Yeah.
Well, Todd, what is going on?
You know, on the front lines, Rob, thank you. On the front lines, it's just pure competition, right? It is just competition, and that comes from various sources, right? So we're fighting that fight day in and day out. And, you know, we're in sales, so we've got to hold the line. We've got to hold our price. On the back side, we do our best to, like Chris said earlier, to sharpen our pencil in certain line items to make sure that we're able to deliver a good price. You know, capital markets puts a great price out on the street, right? It's what happens between the prices they put out and the consumer sees it. So we're really getting aggressive in those areas, sharpening our pencil. And, you know, it's led to some exciting times. It's led to some tough decisions we've had to make, but it's kept us profitable, and we're excited about the future.
Sonny, what are your thoughts on reasons out there?
Well, the reasons are beyond my control. The macroeconomics of this, what Phil was describing in much more articulate manner than I'll try to delve into. But the consequences of it for us have been described as, it's not just fine-tuning your pencil. It's re-delving into your entire operation to find a cost structure that you can now survive in this environment. You know, from automation, technology, outsourcing, and engaging every aspect. You know, us as owners and presidents, we run a sales organization. We got to fight that battle over there, hold our price, train our loan officers on where the market is, because there has to be some LO comp discussion with margin compression, and that's education of those loan officers and the entire company on what the new environment is. But it's really had to, I'm an engineer by nature, and I really had to go back in and try to look at re-engineering everything to find things I just didn't look at before. And it's, as I told each department, it's every expense now comes across, you have to justify, explain it. Why was it here? Why was it ever here? Do we ever need it going forward? And scrutinize everything. It's like, ask why. Why do I do this every day? Do I need to do this? Who gets value out of it? Who's the servant? Who's benefacting from it? There is nothing unquestioned. It's created a lot of work and turmoil in the company, but it's necessary to go through this to survive.
Yeah. Leo?
You know, first I want to say that we're positive on 2019, and I want to bring that up because in talking about margin compression and all the straws on the camel's back, it sounds a little bit doom and gloom. But we're a purchase shop. Loan balances are going to be higher. We spent a lot of money on recruiting production this year. It was a one-time expense, which is going to wear off. So, you know, so we're positive on 19. Now that said, let's talk about some of the issues. You know, addressing margin compression, Bill Berliner's got a white paper out there that anybody can download that really matches TBAs against required net yield and the benchmark 30-year, and really comes to one of the conclusions that we're not getting the raw price that we should be because of the wind in our face and the Fed not buying anymore. So when you're looking at the manufacturing process and you're paying a higher raw price for material and you're paying higher input cost on wages and you're not getting the price for the finished product, I mean, that's really tough. So what do you do about that? All you can do is operational efficiencies, like you said. You got to find ways with Encompass. Most of us are LMA users to find efficiencies, to redesign the system so you can plug every leak and pick up every tick you can on things like AOT. So,
yeah. Phil, are you seeing among your clients who offer, you know, retail, wholesale, correspondent, are you seeing different margin compressions based on product line? I know everybody says, oh my gosh, our margins are razor thin, but are you seeing a difference in those channels?
Yeah, we definitely we see some interesting kind of dynamics just around the country. You know, Florida seems to be strong. I think the Atlanta area seems to be strong as far as margins now, and I don't know if that correlates in Atlanta's case, for instance, with just the area doing so well. But we definitely do see it. Whereas out here in Southern California, it's pretty you know, it's pretty competitive. So we see area specific. Obviously, you know, consumer direct is pretty you know, pretty thin as well. But these guys can tell you a lot more about how you don't have some other costs with the consumer direct side.
Yeah. Are you guys seeing that in terms of different channels reacting differently?
We're retail only, primarily. Rob purchase
Right.
business, so we don't see as much of that as you
Yeah.
might think. I know you've got a consumer direct channel, I think.
We have a call center in which we've had to modify the strategy on that, so it's not really, it's not rate anymore. Now it's for cash out for different reasons. So it's mostly cash out refinancing that would happen due to some areas that have had valuation increases of the housing. So they're not necessarily as rate sensitive. But it's definitely different for each of the geographies we're in. Western PA is definitely different than West Virginia, different than Raleigh-Durham. And we've seen the price compression in the competitive environment. Some of those markets are hyper-competitive, much more than others. And it does seem to be geography by geography on competitive nature. There's a lot of desperation we see out there as well, in which you get to these situations. Some companies, unfortunately unscrupulous, unethical, that will start go through these desperation rates and program structures, and you see not locked on the LEs when they come across. And they're winning the deals, and then later on they're still able to do the bait and switch. It still happens in a way. And that
Desperate people do desperate things.
Yes, and it's desperate times for a lot of competitors out there right now.
And unfortunately, you're only as smart as your dumbest competitor. So, you're chasing that lowest price in the street,
So to what your point is, hold the line, hold your price, and
Hold the line, and then if they complain too much, just let capital markets deal with it. Right, Dave? That's another thing. Sorry, Rob. Is as an owner, I get pulled into a lot of different areas of the company, and I try to stay out of that area. Dave does a great job of managing capital markets. I know he puts a very fair price out. But if I start getting in there, first of all, I stay out of his lane, right? If I get in that lane, then I start being pulled into the pricing game and all that, right? So you got to be very careful with that. But
God bless you.
So any other owners out there, I'd stay out of capital markets way. Let them do their thing. You hired them to do a great job for you. You can look at the MCT reports on a daily basis and see everything that you need to do to run your business, and everything else will work out. Just manage your salespeople, inspire them. Let them deliver a great product, get as many families as we can into homes, and everything else will work out.
So, Leo or Sonny, how do you, when you're talking to your originators, and they're saying, oh, Rob's mortgage up the street, better buy an eighth, better buy whatever, and then you realize Rob's mortgage doesn't have a quality control department or a compliance department, or doesn't have something that you have that you feel you need to move forward to the long term, but Rob's mortgage, it might be, bitter, we're just down to the bare necessities and just trying to scrape by. So we jettisoned all of our QC department, 3 months ago because we couldn't afford them. We got rid of our attorney because we don't care about RESPA or whatever. How do you, when you're dealing with originators who are having to compete against that, do you remind them of that? And what's that speech like? What's that conversation like?
Well, one of the things, whenever you're not the lowest price producer, you have to change the conversation. You have to change the conversation about, can he get the transaction done? Is he going to be there for you? Is the communication going to be there? I mean, that's the only way, and that's not the mortgage business. You'll find that in any field when you're not the low price consumer. Airlines. Same way.
And you're also reminding of the hedging ability that on a lot of the time our competitors are brokers that accept lower comp plans on the wholesale side, and they just come out of the woodwork, but they're tied to that one investor, and when that deal doesn't work out, they're not able to be versatile enough to be able to move it around to the right program or product to make it work if rates have changed at that time. But also they know that they're not going to be there forever. The reputation that you have and established with your referral partners is the key part, because that competitor comes and goes. They have deals they've won, and they've deals that they've crushed, and you have to remind them of those as well. But also it goes to the conversation that I know we've had a lot in the panel discussions, is that if this is going to persist, and I feel it's going to persist for several more months, at least 6 months. Yep. So our policy, we could change comp every 6 months. So let's have a discussion for the next 6 months of changing your comp. If you want to be in a competitive situation, and if you want to, you'll be able to win these deals and maintain your relationships, we have to go into that comp discussion. So we can't just stay at this high level if you want to have those rates.
And To further put some color on your question, it's not the little company down the street that we're losing the business to or anything. We're getting the business in. What's happening is the larger players on the internet, it's the access they can quickly pull up a quote from Quicken or something else. We're getting the business, we're getting squeezed on the price. You know, that's the biggest issue. I don't know if anybody looked at Marina Walsh's from the NBA on November 29th. She put out the Q3 data. It's unbelievable. It's
$480
profit per loan. Think about that, $480. So I got secondary market, I got QC, I got an attorney, I got all of that, and net profit per loan is the appraisal and a final inspection for all of that. Now, here's something worse on net profit.
And a little bit of risk.
And a little bit of risk. Here's another thing you want to think about. That data that the MBA takes, that's from the MBFRF. That's from the quarterly mortgage banking financial filing, okay? Those are only, you know, the cream of the crop, agency sellers, bigger players. You know, if you're not an agency seller, that data's not getting picked up. You go and talk to your warehouse lenders, and you're not going to hear $480 profit when you talk to those people. So it's tough out there right now. Yeah.
So if anybody wants to buy Bayview Capital, no. So
Too young, not for sale.
So I asked you about the discussion with originators. What about, and I'm not going to ask Phil this because I'm sure you have clients who are owned by, you know, venture capital firms or some monolithic financial institutions, correct?
Definitely. I was going to bring up, though, you know, it might be a separate topic. You know, Leo brought up the Q word, you know, Quicken. They're, you know, one thing that Leo also mentioned, you know, can they get the deal done? I think one question I would have for the group is how you guys sell. It seems like our clients that are very successful against a Quicken are basically using that argument. You know, they seem to, their pre-qual is not really a pre-qual. And that also leads into something, I definitely want you guys to talk about that, but that also leads into something that they're pushing hard right now called Rate Shield, which is this, you know, lock and shop BS deal, you know, which we've got, Bill Berliner and I have worked on some stuff that, you know, you guys can offer on that as well, but I'd love to hear your guys' take on.
You know, sales is sales, right? And we were at a lunch earlier this year, and an AE from one of the companies that we do business with, he said it just off the cuff, but it resonated with me, and I still use it to this day. And sometimes it doesn't go over real well with loan originators, and we just got to remind them, you know, we are in sales, right? And we are in sales, so we have to do a really good job of diffusing the elephant in the room, if you will, right? So, you know, we pull out things like the triangle of trust, right? The referral partner, and they referred me because I do, you know, base my business on referral only. We close on time. This is a contract. It's a legally binding contract. We pull all that stuff out, and we empower our originators. I'll tell you, our originators, they do a great job. They do. They are constantly working their trade. They're educating themselves. We send them a lot of information to help educate themselves and their referral partners. And we empower them, quite frankly, to take those sales skills and win more deals. Our focus going into next year is trying to convert these pre-quals that we have that are prospects and try to have a higher conversion rate. We run right now about 26% of our pre-quals go to closing. We want to try to get that up into the 35-40% range. So we're going to really work on different ideas, if you will, to try to get that pull-through up. But, you know, it's all about sales origination. And like I said, capital markets, they put a fair price out. It's what happens between that and the consumer sees it, and it's all activities. It's not just working on an ROI from everybody that's involved. It's also working on the sales techniques and empowering those salespeople to get it done. And when they call, we're there, you know. And I saw something in the news today, a large company, you know, they were knocking the LOs a little bit, I thought, but, you know, that's the nature of our business. We do a really, really good job at supporting our loan originators, and if you don't think you should be doing that, then this may not be the business for you, because they are out there. I originated loans. It is not easy to bring loans in on a consistent basis. It's every month is different. It starts over, back to zero, and it's not easy. So we bend over backwards to give everybody those tools to be successful.
Todd, I'll follow up on that. I won't repeat all of that, 100% accurate. One thing I did find with Quicken Loans, whenever their advertising campaign kicks off in a certain market, I see more sales contracts hit real estate offices. So we time our visits a lot to, if we see activity from Quicken Loans on TV, we'll make sure we'll go to the offices and reiterate their pull-through rates, which are terrible. And it says, like, you just got a contract with Quicken Loans on it. Do you want to make sure that closes? Give us a chance with the buyer.
To your point, I mean, these sales contracts are legally binding contracts.
Yeah.
And we as an industry tend to just put it in a file and move on. Well, we focus on that, right? You got a commitment date on there, you got a closing date, you got a deposit that might go firm after X amount of days. So we focus on that.
And this is part of the problem with somebody like Quicken. They don't have boots on the ground. So, you know, we've all survived because we're purchase guys, right? I mean, we've been there and we've always been told you gotta, you know, do purchase. Kind of wrong on that. I mean, looking back, who knew that the curve was going to go like this, and somebody like Quicken could start with a refis and go like that for so long. So they got this massive balance sheet, you know, and they're out there, and they've got no boots in the ground, so all they have is price. So that's coming in. We're winning it, but they're taking out some of the margin. So what are you going to do? You got to keep just moving on and fighting another day. And
well, that's the making deals work, and that's where somebody said in another panel, we're advisors. The relationship's never going to go away. It may be an emoji relationship, you know, but it's going to be, you know, involved in advisory, solving problems, because we've all gone through the online app and the questions, and everybody's trying to automate the experience of the online app. And how much of the relationship is that taking away? How much of the advisory opportunity is that taking away to build a rapport and the retention of the client? And as things pop up, their pay stubs change, you're able to save, change the file, and build a rapport with everybody to have a high retention.
But, so we're sitting here talking about Quicken, but everybody here knows that of the $1.5 trillion of mortgages that'll be originated this year, Quicken doesn't have 100% market share. There are thousands, I forget the HMDA data shows, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 other lenders that are out there. But we're sitting here talking about Quicken. What I'm seeing out there is everyone is kind of pointing at Quicken saying, well, Quicken this and Quicken that. There are other competitors that are out there. Quicken by itself can't, when you talk about the competitive industry, competitive nature of our industry right now, it's always been competitive to some extent, but you can't pin necessarily all of the blame on Quicken. Oh, you know, they're causing the industry-wide margin compression because of their pricing. I don't think that's the case. Are you seeing companies out there who are more price setter, let's say Wells Fargo Retail, or other companies that are out there who are price setters who may not necessarily be reacting to Quicken? Be competitive and cut into your margins to some extent.
Yeah, so we have a couple of different models competing against. And when I say Quicken, I'm throwing that internet lender, I'm using as a generic term in case Loan Depot and other people too. So, you know, we're fighting against them on price, but then we got the credit unions. And, you know, the credit unions have unique advantages, and in my area in terms of VA business, Pentagon and Navy Fed, they've got that going. And then you've got the bank model where Chase took retail and internalized it and put everybody on a base and a smaller BIP. So, you know, when Chase really wants to go after the high bow and the jumbo, my guys have a tough time competing against that guy inside the shop there when Chase is going to keep it. So, but that said, we do more business this year than last year, so they're doing a great job. But we've got all those factors that we're competing against.
Yeah. And it's competitive pressure that creates a lot of the compression that we see as well. Summer markets don't have as much. Pittsburgh, for some reason, just every bank wants to go into Pittsburgh. Bank of America came into Pittsburgh, and we've had a lot of pressure from them just because of their new entry. And a couple other smaller banks have come in and really created a lot of compression just from just an overall competitive nature. It's not macroeconomics, it's local geographic economics that created the compression. And it's definitely not that same way in other markets.
Yeah. So Phil, we led off the discussion talking about the causes, and you took the capital market, you put on the capital markets hat and said, you know, VA IRRRL compression, and without naming some lenders, you know, here's what happened. Whereas we're dealing with primary market folks here and what's going on in the competitive landscape. what do you see happening in 2019? You know, you mentioned VA Earl, Ginnie Mae Securities being part of the reason. Do you see that continuing next year?
Well, the rules, you know, obviously the new rules should change some of the, you know, real egregious behavior. I think, again, referencing Bill Berliner, I think what some of his analytics are kind of seeing is that at 6 months you do start to see, you know, maybe more of a spike than in speeds than I think people originally thought. But theoretically, you know, once again the PIMCOs of the world, you know, actually see these new experiences happen and, you know, the speeds slow down, theoretically you should get, again, relatively more premium pricing. Obviously coupons are going to be different than they were, you know, 2 years ago. But theoretically things should get a little bit better on the high end of the curve. But you know, again, give Bill Berliner credit on this. He's looked at like the, you know, compared like what's called a 4 and a 4.5 swap, just the differences, price differences of coupons even on conventionals. And there's no question that you know, people have on the buy side, again, this is the end security buyer, have wisened up to the fact that frankly you guys are just better at, you know, assessing when a borrower has a loan that's frankly in the money, right, that should be refied. And that makes sense over time. You know, all of you guys can get to those borrowers quicker. It makes sense that the speeds on those high coupons would you know, would probably increase over time slightly.
So how about in the primary market? We'll start with Leo. I mean, are you seeing, I know nobody up here owns a crystal ball that I know of, but do you see competitive pressures lessening at all? No. You don't? No. And especially, I mean, we know what Q1 looks like each year. I mean, Q1's tough, right? So we're going to go into a Q1 environment. And, you know, outside of what takes place on tariffs and what takes place on stock earnings, what Treasury has to bring to market, and you know, the Fed probably doing a quarter in December, we're probably looking at higher rates next year. Not terribly higher rates, but it seems like we're going to be looking at higher rates. So it's still going to be like, you know, and MBA is talking about the same amount of volume, so it's going to be better for us, but it's still going to be tough.
Yeah. I think desperation is going to still continue through the first quarter. There's still a lot of players that are starting to exit. You can see some loan officers getting out of the business, but there's still a lot that are staying in it. And a slow quarter one is going to, that desperation is going to continue, and it's going to take a little bit more time to weed out. I'm fully expecting not till next summer. Yeah,
there's two factors I like going forward next year. One, of course, is the higher loan limit. Anything that can get us away from jumbo in that house. So we like that in balances. We've got some real high balances in the DC area. Another thing, this is going to sound kind of counterintuitive, but Fannie's changes on DU, it's going to really help me if Fannie Mae gets tighter and tighter and tighter on DU, because I used to be 60-40 Govy conventional, and now I'm like 45, you know, 55, and too much conventional. So if I can get some Fannie fallout and take it back to Govies, that would help a lot. So,
Todd, what do you think?
Well, I'm from Florida, so I predict sunshine. Yeah, I think more of the same. I think rates are probably going to, you know, flatten out, if you will, going into next year, but competition is going to remain fierce. But I also think if you want to grow, I think there's going to be some great opportunities to pull some people away from some other companies. And if you do the right things day in and day out, you can't go wrong with that. Right?
This is an interesting opportunity. Just came up to us a couple of days ago, and this wasn't even on my radar to think about, because we're all focused on IMBs, right? We got a call from a bank, a small bank. I never saw this coming, and the chairman of the bank says, you know what, I know you guys, you know what you're doing, and I don't want to do any kind of deal with another bank. I'm running a mortgage company that's only doing about $50 million a year, and I want out. It's not worth it. I'm not making any money. Let's do a deal together. So we're going to sit down. I didn't see that coming. I mean, what kind of world is this now that you got banks coming to IMBs? You know, because let's face it, to make a living, you got to be a 7-Eleven, right? I mean, you got to have every product, man. Case, home style, bond, everything. You got to do it. And a little guy, you're doing $50 million of production here. You can't run that deal. You can't do that. So.
Yeah, that actually doesn't surprise us. We've definitely seen that. You know, MCT is not in the business to make all their clients one client, so we don't love consolidation. But we have seen that with banks. It's definitely been interesting. You guys can probably speak a lot to you know what those issues are.
We've tried some of those relationships, and you know they want to keep runoff from happening, right? Their depository relationships, but it's tough for some of these smaller banks. They're not in the business, and it's challenging.
Well, the other thing is, and you guys might have saw this in a Gary McCauley article a couple weeks ago, but banks are punished. If they have 25% more of their earnings from the mortgage origination side, they lose in the multiple they're trading at. So commercial banks, for the most part, they want them for the deposits as they're merging. They don't want your mortgage operation. So these guys are filling CRA requirement and they're running it because they have to, but you know, they're not.
Well, that gets to a bigger point of more direct to consumer. A lot of what we get is referral business, which I'm sure you'll do. And in order for us, for next year, for my intent to grow the business is going to more direct to consumer, not in the call centers I have, but more directly before they get to a party that might recommend another investor. And that getting directly to the relationship is deciding to do that and finding those venues to do it. And we have to, you know, when the barrel is getting empty, you got to find a new barrel. And that's what we're really investigating a lot of different ways. And we have some, you know, other paths that you just wouldn't think of, banks and other places that we do mortgages every day extraordinarily well. And that's what we do. We don't try to do anything else. That's what we do. And go focus on showing that if you don't do it well, let us do it for you.
So let's talk about, let's switch gears here a little bit. Same volume next year, supposedly. Rates up. Recruiting branches, recruiting loan officers. What is the atmosphere out there like now for loan officers who might be considering other opportunities, or branches that might be considering other opportunities? What's that discussion like? What are you guys hearing in the trenches in terms of companies or individuals who might be making a move? We'll start with Todd.
Talking about on the recruiting area?
Yeah.
It's embarrassing sometimes, some of these things that I hear, some of these offers that are put out there. And with all due respect to people that are doing it the right way in the recruiting field, you know, they're not often being real responsible for what they're offering. And it's a constant challenge. And heck, I'm in sales. I sell against that all the time, right? So hopefully you'll see some of that behavior get modified over the next 6 months to a year. I hope it happens. But in the meantime, we'll just point the facts out, dispel any myths that might be out there, and aggressively try to hire if we can.
So you're still seeing you're still seeing signing bonuses, high guarantees, et cetera?
Telling them what they want to hear. I mean, I've heard this phrase years ago, pitch and heat. I mean, there's a lot of pitch and heat, you know, and so we have to dispel that. A lot of those myths, right? So when you're talking to them, and you know, we engage one-on-one with them, get to know them. You know, in our shop, we had about 21% increase from last year, and we did that by hiring the right people and really hiring people that we genuinely like and that we genuinely want to work with. And if we don't think that's going to be the case, we don't hire them, right? So we don't want anybody to be disruptive on our ops side. We don't want anybody to be disruptive on our sales side, so we want to hire like-minded people. And that's been why we've had kind of this nice, slow, controlled growth each year.
We've had some people leave at the beginning of the year because a lot of these guarantees that are given out that are extraordinary numbers and the promise of the comp plans that are higher than what they are, what we had, and compression will affect that. That's actually turned out to be a benefit for us because 90% of them came back. Learning that the grass is not greener. Green has many different shades of green. And
you know what it's usually fertilized with.
Yeah. And so but in that, when they were exiting, went through, you know, I took care of them, actually probably took better care of them when they were leaving than when they were here. So it was very easy for when they came back, and it really clamped down. I don't have really a lot of recruiting pressure now because of that. They provided so many examples of like they left, they came back. And then the ones that didn't come back, they're still struggling. So everybody else in the company sees it, well, it didn't work out for them, why should I consider doing it too?
That's a very good point.
It reminds me that Far Side cartoon. There was a Far Side cartoon years ago with, I think, a goldfish or two that were in the bowl. And there was a goldfish that had tried to get out, and you could see its skeleton outside the bowl. And they said, oh, he must, Frank must have made it. He hasn't come back.
Yeah.
And
We got to find that cartoon.
That's a good. That's a good one.
Anyway,
to Sonny's point, you can get some data. There's a lot of data out there on production levels for loan originators, and you could demonstrate that where their production was, when they were with you, and where it went to, right? So, and then you put that cartoon underneath that. So that's a great idea.
I have to say, I take a little different tact on that. And in the DC area, it's very competitive, and people are still paying up for talent, and we put some big offers up there, and we're still losing out. But if you think about this, if you're buying a business, I mean, if it has a strong cash flow, why not pay up for it? I mean, the cash flow, if I don't have a $20 million producer and I'm paying him X, and he's going to give me production I didn't have, in some ways, he's paying for himself coming in, because I didn't have that production. So, we will pay up for people that we know. Somebody has to know this person, and he has to fit into our culture. That's the most important thing. We don't do that with strangers, but we're paying.
Culture is huge, and Chris mentioned this earlier today. How many people worked in the restaurant business growing up, right? I did. And for those of you in the restaurant business that worked there, do you remember it was the waiters against the cooks? Remember that? You'd run back there with your order, and the cooks said, sorry, you didn't fill it out right. Well, but the customer wants, I don't care what they want, and all that stuff. And I remember working in the restaurant business when I was in college and in high school. And I thought, that's this line between the front of the house and the back of the house is just unacceptable. And later, when I got out of school, I sold fax machines and copiers, and it was the same thing. The sales guys against the guys that were delivering the equipment. I just wanted it to be there so I could demonstrate this thing. And so when I got in the mortgage business, it was the same way. So when we started the company back in '95, we thought, you know what, we're just not going to have this. So we have really, really worked hard to blend the front of the house and the back of the house together. There is none of that stuff that goes on. You all know what I'm talking about, right? So we have really blended it that everybody in the ops can bring it in sales if they need to. They got a salesy way about them. The salesy people, we let them interact with the operations people. There's really not much of a line between the two. It's really cohesive, and that's worked really well for us.
Yeah. So bring up an interesting point in terms of culture, in terms of discussions and melding the front and the back. What are a couple bullet point topics that you would have with your originators in terms of, hey, maybe a little pep talk or explaining the facts of life to them, to say, margins have been tough, the environment's tough. Here's what I'm thinking for 2019. How do you encourage your production staff? What do you tell them, in a nutshell, or do you even give pep talks to originators?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I've got a team under me. I've got a fantastic CEO and fantastic president. I'm more of an engineering guy, operations guy. I was the founder of the type of deal. And they have certain talents that I don't have, and that's why I brought them in. And they're fantastic with the sales guys and keeping them going in meetings and keeping their spirits up and do a wonderful job. And part of growing a company is know what you do well and know what you don't do well, and get other people and get out of their way, and let them do it right. So I'm lucky to have that team around me.
Yes.
It's just focusing around the strength is like there was a time in 2010 it was operational excellence. It wasn't that hard to be operationally excellent over some competitors. Now, most companies are pretty good at operations. They've all improved dramatically over the last several years, and automation and other technology is doing that. And so we have to be better. And so providing incentives and structures for the operational team to help even be one tennis shoe ahead of the next person and constantly improve them and provide incentives for doing that. And then them seeing the reward of still being successful in an environment of higher competition, but keeping them informed of where the market is. It doesn't hurt as well when all the news reports come across with everybody getting laid off all the time. They feel a little bit more motivated by seeing Wells Fargo laying off, all these different companies laying off. Then they're like, okay, yeah, I need to focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah. Todd, how about in your shop?
It's all about inspiration and motivation, right? That's my job. Right? Give them the tools and inspire and motivate them, and my partners and I do that every day. We inspire and we motivate. And you know, sales originators are salespeople. They're strong personalities. They're very competitive, right? So you'd be surprised what, you know, when you compare their numbers to other loan originators in the company, what that can do for them. And we do that. We post that once a week, and so they can see where the production levels are in the branches with the other LOs. And that's been very, very effective. And then from there, you take best practices that are working at the higher tiered guys, and you let them roll that out. And so we're wide open with coaching with all of our originators. A lot of companies keep them separate for fear of losing, you know, one branch, and then they're all going to follow them. But you know, if you do the right thing day in and day out, you shouldn't have that fear, right? So we open it up. We let them all talk. And they've forged some great relationships, and you know, just by that competitive spirit, that's been very powerful to us. You know, and there's that acronym that you all have heard, right? FOMO, fear of missing out. So we'll put some of that out there. You know, if you don't do these certain things, you're going to miss out on production. You're going to miss out on some referral opportunities. You're going to miss out on whatever. And so we're big on putting that stuff out. But every day we're inspiring and motivating. Every day.
Do you share MCT's reports with branch personnel?
Absolutely not.
Sonny, do you?
No, I do not.
Leo?
No.
Oh, there you have it.
It's funny, I was
Phil?
really proud of my first person I had this idea, what was it, probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, it's been a while, where we'd give $1 million pickup plaque, and all these guys have them, and I remember we were in one guy's office and he said, okay, we're going to put that in the drawer and we're never going to see it again. You know, it was kind of funny. I expected it to go on the wall.
I will tell you, I have showed on my, because I get the MCT report every day, and I go to the summary sheet, right? It's all you need to know, right? There's like 3 or 4 sections, you look at it. And you know that section where sometimes there's a lot of numbers in red?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So sometimes, one or two times, I've turned my phone around and said, hey, you want to see some risk? There's $1 million worth of checks that have got to go out.
I've shown them that.
So I've shown them that.
The dealer wires out. Yeah, dealer wires out.
They look at it and oh my God, and that's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the truth. And listen, this is a risky business. Let's not.
And then also show them the 99 price when the reverse of that happens.
Well, you know, I'll just show them that, but that just shows the risk. And this is a risky business. And we give them all, like, again, all the tools in the front end. We'll manage the risk, right? But it is a risky business, so I have shown them that a few times. It's been very effective, actually.
And one of the things they never realize the risk is when things are going fantastic for them, like post-Brexit, okay? We're July 5th, we're 137 on a 10-year, right? These guys are crushing it. The gift that doesn't stop giving in terms of refi. They don't know about our margin calls, you know, where we are short on our TBA positions.
They have no idea.
They have no idea.
Yeah. And it's good to educate them on that,
yeah.
right?
I mean, you're hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars you're writing in checks, you know? And so.
Yeah. Phil, are you seeing, among other clients, besides these 3, how much sharing is there of capital markets information with the production staff, with the branches, and so forth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually just got an email before stepping up here from a client who couldn't be here today out in Arizona, and it's basically asking me to email and kind of inform a guy who wants to basically break a lock. You know, he thinks with the rally you should get a lower rate, and kind of just inform them. And we're good for that, you know, as far as if you need us, kind of sending an email on kind of how the world works with regards to there being a trade out of the money and exactly how much out of, you know, how far out of the money that trade might be, you know, given a rally. But we do, yeah, to Todd's point, we don't see a lot of, you know, the pickup plaques going to the originators or the, you know, or the summary sheets going to the originators. But we do, yeah, it's a great point with Brexit. You know, when you get into those big rally situations, those are, you know, frankly, probably some of the most risky times, you know, for an owner. And the originators don't see that, so it is important. And we've been on countless calls, probably literally over 100 different organizations, you know, just kind of talking to originators, to branch managers. We're really good for that, you know, when you guys talked about recruiting, you know, if an originator is thinking about walking away, going somewhere else, and maybe they do, maybe you've been open to them about your margins, So they're thinking that this other group just has bigger, has some better pricing. There's some magic pricing somewhere, and we can just show you that the market just simply doesn't bear that. You know what I mean? I'm up there talking about 9 basis points being an egregious amount of margin, which it is. But I've heard branch managers talking to owners of our clients saying that these guys are going to give us half point better pricing, which is just
So
asinine.
it's true we're all selling vanilla ice cream? Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, obviously there's differences, but some of the differences that your originators are being told when they're trying to be recruited is definitely not.
I really, in this competitive market, I don't know how the smaller correspondents that are only best X and not hedging in the pickup, I don't know how that's going to work out. I mean, that's really tough, because what's happening right now on the best X side, to survive, they're yanking, one from the other, right? So now they lost their ability even for tier 1 pricing, because their pull-through is not there. So, I don't know.
Tough situation. So we've got less than 10 minutes left. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask the group?
I'll shoot.
All right.
How much percentage of your guys has moved into non-QM? Much at all, or is it still pretty much?
So the question is non-QM production?
I've done 3. Just
4.
Yeah, I've done just recently, and it was a learning experience. It dedicated a product expert inside the company, an underwriter, to learn the process and just get around it. And the acceptance of our loan officers was the most difficult thing, because their reputation's on the line. They don't want to promise something that's going to fall apart. So I had a few guinea pigs that were willing to do it and work through the niches of it, and we got to a point that we're comfortable. And I have to market it internally that we have a competency for it, but that's part of the strategy of keeping those relationships and improving volume next year is the non-QM route. But it's definitely a learning experience to get there.
Yeah.
My answer all depends on whether or not there's any non-QM lenders on this live stream.
Yeah.
We'll end up with about 1.6 billion this year in production. 7% is non-QM, around there.
That's good.
And we keep it going primarily down one channel. Great relationship, great people.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit from what I'm seeing. The non-QM, in fact, a couple of weeks ago in my commentary, I kind of broke down the numbers in terms of the overall $1.5 trillion industry, and it's still 3% or 5% is non-QM, and so forth and so on. I'm still seeing hesitancy out there from the originators in terms of potential liabilities or perceived liabilities. We don't want to be in a class action lawsuit a year from now. So I'm seeing that. I'm seeing originators who don't want the reputation of being non-QM lenders. And then I am seeing a hesitancy, to your point, in terms of originators who have a hard time selling, borrowers who have heard about 3.5%, 4.5% mortgages, and to sit down across the table and say, well, we can give you 7.5%. That's a tough sales job. And so all of those things are kind of stacked up against it on the origination side.
Well, the spread isn't so much now between the two.
That's true.
Yeah.
But what I am seeing lenders do is not only non-QM, but they're also at least taking a look at reverse mortgages, at small business loans, at commercial loans, at bond loans, at other programs, jumbo, for example, other programs where there's potentially more margin, kind of following the money, like, oh, there's more margin here. So they're at least taking a look at some of the other alternatives, because they have, you guys have these great mortgage factories that are, all set up to originate loans and satisfy borrowers. And you talk about you want to offer everything just because you're trying to make a living. I'm seeing that out there, that companies are more open to other products. So, other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So you guys were talking about having to pay up for an experienced loan officer in the market right now. Have you thought about bringing in somebody that fits in your organization that has the drive, that just doesn't know what they don't know, and training them up?
Training up is tough.
Bring in like the Nordstrom shoe salesman,
Yeah.
or the jewelry
Yeah.
store person, or the person at the post office who does a great customer.
Yeah,
Never mind.
That model's never worked. That
Yeah,
model's really never worked for us.
Personally, we haven't really participated in the paying for people, but we have tried to train people up, and we've had marginal success. It's tough.
The best success I've had is loan officer assistants, loan officers that want to increase their production
Bingo.
and their quality of life. So if they want a loan officer assistant, there's a loan officer assistant for quality of life, which their comp plan is adjusted, or I'll pay for it if their production is increased to help pay for it. But that's also, I use that as the training ground to see if those people want to have the ability and can make it up to that point. It usually takes a year or two. It's not an overnight. It's a long farming process.
Yeah,
you know, go
there's
ahead.
a younger generation of originators that we need to bring into the fold, right? And like Chris said, they're all on their phones, right? So we've had just a great success story in one of our South Florida offices where this young Florida State grad comes out of school and he wanted the email and text and all that, and the branch manager said, look, you need to go out on Saturdays and hit all the open houses. And doggone it if he didn't, and right now he's been in it for a year and he's going to make it. You know, so he followed our lead. So, but that's far and few between. It doesn't happen every day.
Yeah, because most people, there's a short timeline when they come into the industry. They're very excited, they want to get going, but if it doesn't happen in month 6 or 7 or 8, it just weans out, right? So what you really want to do is pick somebody up who spent a year at the bank. If they come into our operation and they can at least speak the language, you know, they're moving already, and they've got some momentum, and we can get behind them, we can help them. So we prefer to have the banks train them for a year and then recruit them away.
Yeah, but Sonny's got a great point. The loan partners or LOAs, loan officer assistant. I mean, that's a great way to transition them into full-time LO. Absolutely, that's a great idea.
It's also for an operational staff path as well, because a lot of them learn like, you know, it's not as good as easy as everybody says it is, and then you actually find some good staff people out of that.
Yeah, the big banks, you know, used to be, I've got trained at U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo. That's diminished greatly. It's not.
You know, and a lot of it is you got to get the right-minded person, because everybody thinks that they can sell. And I've been on plenty of sales calls where I'll have them in the back seat, and all right, we're going to go make sales calls. What? Yeah, put your jacket on, we're going to go in. And that's the last thing they want to do. And so you've got to be very careful on who you bring on. They may not be wired for it, right? So you can do different personality assessments and all that, and you know, don't do it because you like the person or whatever. If you don't think they have that skill set, the best they're ever going to be is just okay. Even in the best, they're just going to be okay. And you know, in this industry, we want the best of the best, right? We want to represent ourselves really well, and we want people that are going to grow and do all the right things. And if you're just going to be okay, that's not for us. We want the people that are going this way, not this way.
And one of the things you'll notice in local markets, it's such a cottage industry, and it's because you really can't go to undergrad and get a mortgage banking degree. So what happens? You find a lot of family, because you need, somebody's got to sponsor somebody. You know, the older brother's got to sponsor the younger brother, the father and the son, family members. So you find that together, because nobody else really wants to spend that much time all day long with a stranger. So you have this connection, and you find a lot of family in pockets, in Maryland, Montgomery County, different places it happens like that. So.
Listening to you guys, I know Rob thinks the same thing because he's from capital markets as well, but listening to all the strategies about training originators, it really does make capital markets seem really simple. That's, I can never.
You have people on the other end of the phone who really want to buy what you're trying to say. Well, we're out of time. I think we covered a lot of ground, and it looks like there's not going to be any kind of light switch that occurs on January 2 in terms of margins and profitability in the competitive environment, which I don't think is a big surprise. But yeah, it's a tough environment, and I think a lot of the companies who are well grounded now and who have a lot of loyal staff and are doing things right, I think they'll succeed next year and the year after, and the ones maybe that don't, may not be around. So thank you very much to the panelists.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.